Welcome to another episode of Tatum Talks in association with Maitland Travel Speedway Holidays. Whichever Grand Prix you've ever dreamed of going to, Maitland Travel can get you there with fully escorted and also self-drive holidays for you to choose from. Find out all the details at maitlandtravel.co.uk, and later on we'll spotlight a couple of their holidays and destinations that you could be visiting. But right now, let's get started, and there's lots to talk about. Tatum Talks with myself, Ian Brannan, and Kelvin Tatum, British Speedway legend, and of course, former multiple world champion on the long track as well. And we'll be talking about some of those big, fast European tracks as we get on to our Grand Prix preview, because heading to Germany soon, which is a place that Kelvin's ridden Speedway bikes quite a lot over the years, and we'll talk about the Grand Prix series first, though, as we get on to the first opening round, which was, of course, in Croatia. And I think the weather was a little bit nicer in Croatia than it was over here, Kelvin, because I think we were all like little ducks once again. But things were a little bit nicer there. And an interesting opening round of the Speedway Grand Prix series. And we have somebody different to Bartosz Zmarzlik standing on that top step for the first time in a while in Croatia. And big one as well for Jack Holder finally getting that first Grand Prix win.
Yeah, it was fantastic. You know, Jack Holder's been coming on really strongly since he won that Speedway of Nations with Max Frick a couple of years ago. We saw what he could do that day in Voyens, and then since then he's become more and more consistent. So unlucky not to win a Grand Prix last year. Everybody knows what happened in Warsaw in the ROWE stadium. So yeah, he rode really nicely. He was fast, he was composed, it was a mature performance from him, and I don't think anybody would begrudge his victory last weekend. And of course, or the weekend before last, excuse me, but there is no question that he fully deserved that, and he leads the World Championship. And of course, it's the first rider to be leading the World Championship for 2 years, which is quite staggering, because Zmarzlik has had it pretty much under control, and Zmarzlik was going for the hat-trick of wins. Made the final, made a half a mistake in the first corner, and Mr. Holder took full advantage. So, and a sweet moment for the brothers. You know, they made history, Chris and Jack, both now Grand Prix winners, which is pretty cool in itself. So, yeah, nice to see. And you could see the joy in him just coming out of him. It was really nice.
Yeah, and he said really it's a big sort of monkey off his back, really. There's been that pressure there of he hasn't won a round yet, and he needs to do that, really. And he can sort of sense the relief now that he's been there and he's done it. And so that thing is not going to be discussed anymore now, certainly for a long time. And he can sort of focus on his performances, and a good day for the Australians in general, I think, as well, with Jason Doyle getting back on the podium as well, which I think he did well last year in Croatia. It's a track he sort of goes well at, but for him, again, there's always been those questions, as Jason Doyle still got it, and I think certainly he's answering those critics at the moment, and why not?
Yeah, absolutely. He had an awful week. I mean, he did so well when you consider he didn't arrive back to Britain on the Monday to race for his club Ipswich against Bellevue. That must have frustrated him. Then, of course, he was rained off on Thursday at home when they had a deluge at Vauxhall, and then had a poor meeting on Friday night for his Polish club. Travelled through the night as half the field did, actually. 8 riders were riding in the Extra Liga on Friday night, and sort of turned up there, and I think he was sort of a little bit sort of lost mentally, because he was thinking, crikey, what is going to happen? And in fact, actually, second and third, Freddie Lindgren also, they didn't win a race at the Grand Prix, but they managed to come second and third. So for an Australian 1-2, obviously down under, they'll be chuffed to bits with that, rightly so. And Jason Doyle, who worked so hard, I mean, he really does put an awful lot in. He was chuffed to bits, and just a brief conversation with him, he couldn't quite believe it had happened after the week he had had. But as I say, he's a hard-working speedway rider, so he deserves everything he gets. And who knows, if he can just, as you rightly say, Ian, he started the season well. He made a lot of finals early on, but then got thrown out a lot of them. You know what I mean? He was just a little bit rash and unfortunate in Poland last year. But there's no doubt about it that Jason Doyle still retains the hunger to win another World Championship. That's obvious.
And also on the podium, Freddie Lindgren, once again, of course, he gave Bartosz a bit of a scare, perhaps through a bit of a quirk of what happened in that round in Denmark, wasn't it, where he got kicked out, Bartosz Zmarzlik, with the race suit business and all that, and that sort of narrowed the chase down. But Freddie, once again, he's starting out with a lot of intent, wants to finally nail it. He's been there or thereabouts for so many years, hasn't he? And in just in many other years, probably would have been a multiple world champion by now. But Bartosz Zmarzlik's here, and one of the greats of modern times, of course, if not all time of Speedway, and he's just a thorn in his side.
Yeah, Freddie's been around nearly 2 decades in the World Championship. He's he's had some pretty tough competitors, but he's like wine, really. He's getting better with age. He's late 30s now. He has, he's tremendously fit. He's had some health issues in recent times, but he does appear to be fit and healthy these days. And clearly, like Jason Doyle, he's determined to win. But unlike Jason Doyle, he doesn't have a championship in the bag. And I think he would dearly love to clinch one. Whether he'll be able to do that in 2024, I don't know. The jury's out for me. The jury is out. What these guys have got to do, because if that was a slight slip up by Zmarzlik by finishing 4th, they cannot afford to go to Landshut, or they can't afford, like Martin Vaclik last year, he went to Gorzów and scored 3 points. You can't do that when you've got a Zmarzlik in the field, because he isn't. He isn't. His worst Grand Prix is going to be 12 and just missed the final. So that puts pressure on everybody else. But you're right, Ian. I sense that, Freddie is here. He grinds away. He finds a way to make his way to the latter stages of a GP, and he did it at the weekend. And if we finally look at Zmarzlik, as I say, I think he would have been a little bit disappointed not to be on the rostrum, but I'm pretty sure 14 points in the bag. No panic there. No panic.
Looking at the Brits, it was looking good for Robert Lambert for a good proportion of the time in that GP at Croatia. He was there or thereabouts up the top, and you fancied that, again, maybe he could be in the final, maybe he could be standing on the top step, but it sort of fell apart for him towards the end. But what's your assessment overall of the Brit pack?
Well, we'll start with Robert. Robert rode beautifully at the beginning of the meeting. Looked like he clicked into gear straight away and looked very comfortable. Looked composed. He had 3 wins, and then he drifted away at the back end of the qualifying races. But I still expected him to be confident and make the final. When he doesn't make the final, when you've ridden that well through the qualifiers, and we've mentioned it, you've got 2 guys that finished on the rostrum that didn't win a race. That's what he has to put right. You have to, if you're riding that well and you're in tune with everything, and you're doing the business out there, then you can't slip up in the semi-final. You've got to make it. You've got to have a mental strength or a way of making sure you get to the latter stages. I'm sure it frustrated the hell out of him, because to ride that well and not make the final, I'm sure he was kicking himself. But Lambert's a quality rider. I'm sure he'll put that right. As regards Dan Bewley just had a meeting where it just didn't look like he had the right setup to me. He was trying his guts out. He had a nasty moment when he was thrown on his backside at one point, and that knocked the wind out of his sails. I don't think it was for lack of effort. I just think they just didn't get it right. And as I say, when you've got Bartosz Zmarzlik kicking about, you can't afford to do that. You've got to be able to work it out and get a few more. I'm sure he's a bit frustrated with that. Ty Wolfenden, a night to forget. I mean, it's difficult to know what to say. 3-time world champion, clearly a huge talent, but it's a long time since he's won a Grand Prix now, 2018. I'm I would say that he would have been a touch embarrassed about that result. And he needs... I see last night for Sheffield he got a few points. Didn't have a very good build-up to it. He only got 6 points for Wrocław the night before. He's got to get it sorted. He's got a great team of people around him. They've got to work it out and sort of scratch their heads and hopefully find some performance. Narodowy is really important for Wolfenden. He needs a big result.
Well, let's move on to Narodowy then, going to Warsaw. It is going to be the... I know we've had previously a lot of focus on Cardiff, but as far as the attendance goes, this is the biggest Grand Prix of the year. Temporary track, the first temporary track of the year, and we're also going to see the sprint race, as it's been called, for the first time, which is another way to earn some points. Have you got your head around the rules of this yet, Kelv? Can you explain it to us?
Just about, Ian. I shall do my very best for you.
Okay.
Because I'm not always best at describing these convoluted ideas that sometimes pop up. And this one is, I think. I'm not sure I'm in complete agreement with it. But effectively, it's the same as the new format on the qualifying. You've got 4 groups of 4. And they get 2 runs each. And the fastest rider in each group will go through to what they have named as the sprint race. It's not actually a sprint race because it's the same length as a normal race. So that is a contradiction. And I've already made my feelings known about it. If it was a 2-lap dash, then I could get my head around that. But you will then get World Championship points for that. And you will score 4 for a win, 3 for second, 2 for third and 1 for fourth. And then off the back of that, you've still got to have the draw for the evening. And the winning or the top 4 in winning order will get the first 4 picks, and then 5th through to 16 will then continue through. Do you know what? I would like to have seen it like we discussed it the other day, and I've thought about that, where you have 4 in a race, and you have 2 laps, and you have 2 drop out, and then you have a match race to determine the top 2, but that hasn't been the case. But yeah, 4 groups of 4, they get 2 goes each. Top rider from each group will then go and race each other, and that could be, actually significant in the outcome of the World Championship, Ian, because there are 8 points available. It will happen again in Cardiff, and if you're lucky enough to win both of those over the course of 2024, who knows? Could save your Grand Prix career, put you in the top 6, top 3, or even potentially be a world champion. Who knows?
It's I suppose the difference is obviously we see often riders going out in certain blocks having their times faster. So usually, like for example at Croatia, I think the riders in the first block posted way faster times than the riders that went out last. So there is that potential discrepancy there. But I suppose if you're in that block of 4, then it's you've got maybe the same chance as the other 3 guys that you're up against. Is the maybe feeling? I don't know. And the other reason, of course, they're doing it at these. Well, sorry, yeah, go on.
Yeah, well, we did see that actually, and you see it often where you got riders have got to make it work. There will be more pressure on them with championship points up for grabs on a Friday evening, as it works out in Narodowy. But we saw it in Croatia where a rider would actually produce a very good time, or a couple of the riders would improve their times, and one rider wouldn't, and that's when you've missed out. So you have got to be on top of your game. You can't. There's going to be more pressure on it, and riders will be potentially under. It will be more difficult to experiment in some ways. But I just think that it will be very interesting when you get, riders that certainly by the time we get to August and we get Cardiff and the championship is taking, obviously it's beginning to settle down and we can see who's doing well and who isn't. That's when, if you get some of the big hitters, so you could, for example, you could have the top 3 in the world in one group, and 2 of them are going to miss out on the opportunity to get extra points. So, it is a talking point. It's going to be of interest. It will give more emphasis on the qualifying for sure. No question about it. It will focus people's minds, and let's see. It's easy to criticise, but let's see. Let's let it run through and take its course. I'm sure we'll do another podcast and reflect on it before we get to Cardiff. So, yeah. But going to the Narodowy, arguably there'll be 50,000 people there. Fabulous stadium. It's a pretty decent track. It was last year, and incredibly, Ian, a Polish rider has not won there yet, and they are they are very keen for that to happen. So will it be in 24? Will it be this time around?
Why do you think that is? Do you think it's because it's a track that doesn't have like home advantage as such, and it's a bit more of a lottery on the day? Because obviously that's one of the reasons they're doing the sprint races, of course, isn't it? Because there's no home advantage as such. It's a fresh track for everybody, and that's why it's going into Cardiff as well as something a little bit different. So do you think that's the reason that the Polish guys there are not able to have their little black book of their setups? And well, nobody is, because it's probably different every time.
It varies a little bit every time. Obviously, it's been running for a few seasons now, but and guys will have notes. Of course, they will. But I think you've got a point to a degree. I think that they don't have the opportunity to test there regularly. The surroundings are unfamiliar because it's an indoor event. It's in a stadium that doesn't ordinarily hold speedway events. So yes, I think there is some merit to that point of view. But I also think what is also important to understand is the way of expectation. Speedway is huge in Poland. It is going from strength to strength. They won every gold medal in 2023 that was up for grabs. So they dominate the World Championship, and therefore in the capital city, winning in front of that, I would think also demands on somebody like Zmarzlik are absolutely huge. He has politicians there, they have dignitaries there that he will have to meet and greet at some point. And I think that also plays its part. So he's a bit of a monkey on his back, certainly for Zmarzlik. He hadn't made a final there until last year. He went out of the place looking like he'd won it just by making the final last year. So I'm sure they will have a Polish winner at some point, but it does seem a tough one for them.
Yeah, well, the top four last time were the top four from Croatia in the previous round, because Freddie Lindgren won it last year, didn't he? And Jack Holder second, Bartosz Zmarzlik third, Jason Doyle fourth. So a familiar look as it sort of works out, ironically. But riders there that you can all expect them to be going well. And as you say, there's opportunities there for the likes of Dan Bewley, Robert Lambert. Obviously, as you mentioned, Ty Woofenden could do with a decent performance as well in that one.
Yes, he would. Dan Bewley has won in Cardiff, of course, so he's got no fears of indoor tracks or temporary tracks. Ty Woofenden has been very close to winning at Cardiff. No, those three guys, they won't have any fears going into Warsaw, and all three of them will be looking for a big result. Certainly, Bewley and Woofenden will be looking to up their performance. Just a quick mention on the wild card, of course. Matthias Sieniak comes in, the SGP2 World Speedway Champion, back-to-back under-21 World Champion. A rider that does look like he's going to make big inroads. He rides with Zmarzlik, of course, in the Lublin club. What a star-studded lineup that is for a Speedway club.
Yes, isn't it?
They've got 4 Grand Prix riders and the SGP2 World Champion. I mean, whoever shells out the money at the end of the day for that one each meeting is a wealthy chap. But nonetheless, Sieniak is, I'm sure, is excited about being wildcard, and I don't think it could be a bit of a spoiler in there because he's a decent rider.
So that is going to be taking place Friday, May the 10th for the qualifying practice and the sprint race. And then the Grand Prix itself is on the Saturday, May the 11th at the Narodowy in Warsaw. And then moving on to the round 3. And, you got your Lederhosen and the Flugelhorn ready there, Kelvin, because you're going back to Bavaria for the German Grand Prix, which is heading to Landshut this time.
Indeed, there's going to be an Umpar band there for sure, and we're going to have the traditional Bavarian beer tent. You've got to be careful with that. That's quite a dangerous environment to go into. You'll never ever get out of it. You come out of there quite second-hand, I can assure you. A change of venue. We're going from north to south. Tetro, of course, in the northeast, north of Berlin. Now we're going to about 45 minutes away from Munich. A track that is synonymous with Grand Prix back in the 90s. It's held European Championship rounds as well. So it's not unaccustomed to running international events. Actually, I know 2 of the people that run the club there, Pepe Rudolph and his wife, saw them in Croatia. They're excited. They've sold. Capacity is 7,500. Smaller stadium, but they said they'd sold over 6,000 already. So interest in the meeting. A track that is narrow going in and coming out of the corners. It will be a challenge. Starting will be a real emphasis there. Long way to the first corner. It's going to be argy-bargy in the first turn, so there'll be fireworks there. I've seen it happen before. But yes, it's a lovely part of the world. Bavaria is gorgeous. Munich is a really cool town. So if people haven't been there now, I'm sure people haven't been there. It's a nice place to go. And we've got young, just referring to my notes here, Norwich Bladorn is the wild card. And young Norwich is getting along nicely, so I'm sure he's looking forward to it.
Yeah, and Norwich Bladorn, actually, I think his backstory, he's a protege of Egon Muller, one of the riders he's been working with. So that's the route he's come into in Speedway. He's the sort of guy that's been coaching him, of course, through the young days on those tracks in the north of Germany. And here he is now. He's been buzzing around the Grand Prix scene for a while. I think he's been in SGP2 in the past, maybe on the odd occasion, but a rider, I think this year he's a good lad. You know, he's great to chat to. Always comes over and will speak to you and say hello. Always up for an interview. His interviews are always world class. He's always wearing Crocs. You don't have to look up to find where Norwich is. Just look down at the shoes, and you will find the guy wearing zebra print Crocs is Norwich. And he's good quality, but he's been riding really well this year. Very fast indeed, particularly at Manchester, and he's beaten some big riders. He was in that Peter Craven meeting, and he beat the likes of Jason Doyle and Robert Lambert early on. So he's certainly got the speed in those bikes.
Yeah, and that's no surprise. There's some good engine tuners kicking about in Germany, and he is very familiar with big European tracks coming from that part of the world. And he is quite a character. You're right. He was wearing his Crocs at Birmingham last Monday, and I mean it was like Baltic. And I mean fair play to him, But it can be pretty chilly up in northern Germany in the winter as well. So he's obviously got good circulation. But he's got a smile on his face. He's a character. He's a good rider, and he's adapting, and I think riding in England is brilliant for him because that's giving him a variety of different tracks and surfaces to sort of, better his skills. And I'm sure Norwich will be a spoiler there. He'll be very keen to do well. He's a young lad. He was German champion at 19, so he's got some credentials already. So it's good that Germany's a big market for Speedway. They want to develop it there, and they've got a young rider here that looks like he's got a lot of potential. So it'll be an exciting night for him for sure. As I say, I sense that most riders will have experience of Landshut. They won't ride there regularly, but it is a bit quirky, Ian. It is a little bit quirky. It's big, but it's narrow. And so therefore you need to be on your game, particularly getting that bike working to the first corner. But as I say, decent ticket sales already. I think we could be in for an entertaining night.
Yeah, Landshut, obviously not on the Grand Prix scene, but for a while. But it's a sort of track where they have the qualifiers and so on for getting into the Grand Prix. Yeah. They've had those kind of meetings, or the European internationals and things like that. The sort of international meetings that go under the radar of below the Speedway of Nations and the World Cup, but still these international meetings happen on the continent pretty much weekly or every other week. There's something going on. There's a British team heading out there. You might not see it all the time, but there's stuff going on, and it's that kind of venue. So as you say, the riders will have experience of going there for these events where they drive for 16 hours to ride 3 heats and then come back again.
Yeah, what a life. It's such a glamorous life. But you're absolutely right. I remember going down there to do a Speedway World Cup qualifier years ago, and the Czech Republic and the Poles were there, and we were dashing all over the continent to do it that way in that previous format. But no, I think that it will hold its own. As I say, it's a lovely part of the world. For visitors coming in, to be able to spend a bit of time in Munich is not a bad place either. Landshut itself is very pleasant. It's not a village; it's a town. So there is facilities there for people. So yeah, I think it's I think it's good, and let's hope it's successful for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to seeing how it goes for them, and it's good to get these different venues on the calendar as well. And go to different places, and we hope for more of that in the coming weeks and months and years.
Yeah, just before we finish on the Lancashire, of course, and they've got a permanent rider. Germany have got a permanent rider in the lineup, and we should have mentioned it earlier. But Kai Hülkenberg actually rode very well in Croatia. He looks fit and well, and he came in with a positive attitude, and he rode nicely. So Germany have got a full-time Grand Prix rider to follow, and he got off to a solid start. So by the time we get there for round number 3 in Lancashire, hopefully he's maintained that form in the ROWE, and they can get right behind him. So they've got 2 Germans to cheer for.
While we round up the Grand Prix section of this podcast, just to mention, if you want to go to any of these far-flung places and you're not sure really how to get there, then we recommend Maitland Travel Speedway Holidays to get you there, because they go into all of the different Grand Prix. They'll even get you to Cardiff. If you're not sure how to get there, they'll make that easy as well. That's a bit of an easier one, but they'll take you not only to the Grand Prix, there's loads of other fixtures. If you check out their website, maitlandtravel.co.uk, they've got all sorts of things and weird and wonderful trips that you can go on, even heading to Australia and to the United States in the winter. If you want some winter speedway, they're going there as well to check out the Australian Championships. But a couple of particular trips just to highlight that might be interesting and sort of far enough away so you can give it some thought and save your pennies. Wrocław, a fantastic venue for speedway, of course, in the Extraliga, the home track for the likes of Dan Bewley and Maciej Janowski and Ty Woofenden, but a venue once again for the Grand Prix. It was the venue for the World Cup last year, but a great speedway town, this, Kelv. Just tell us about Wrocław in general.
Well, Wrocław's got a fabulous history. It was occupied in the war. It's really has got a backstory to it. Just so from that point of view, it has that added dimension to it. If you go there, you can fly to the town, or to the city rather. There are direct flights from the UK there, which Maitland Travel, of course, will make you aware of. It's a lovely town square. I mean, it's gorgeous. And at the end of August, it's normally really nice and warm, and bars and restaurants throughout. So it's smashing atmosphere. It's sort of like a carnival atmosphere there. The Olympic Stadium, of course, was completely renovated back in 2017 for the World Games. It's still got its traditional look, but it's a fantastic venue. Good speedway track. It's one of the best venues on the calendar, in my opinion. And as I say, at that time of year, it's summertime. It's a smashing place to go.
Okay, and another trip that'll be coming up before you know it is Vojens. Now, a couple of interesting things there. Of course, Ollie Olsen is the man behind this. I discovered when I had a chat with Pete Adams in the winter that Peter Adams actually pretty much helped design it. So there's a lot of speedway history in there. Not only is it the creation of Ollie Olsen, but also Peter Adams, who did a few drawings for him, and it is obviously a purpose-built venue. And again, it's been on the Grand Prix calendar for a while now, hasn't it? That one.
Yeah, it has, and Pete Adams was very much involved with the design of that track, and rightly so, can take a lot of credit for it, because it's always been a terrific venue. It's the centrepiece of Danish speedway, has been. We did have a period of time when we had the Grand Prix at a temporary track, a town relatively close by, called Horsens, which was a football club, and they actually put a temporary track in there. But in recent times, we have transferred back to Vojens, and the crowds have been great. And you can come into Copenhagen if you want that, but ideally, Kolding actually up the road is a nice town where you can stay. Vojens itself is very small, but it's classic Scandinavia, proper track. A Danish winner last year, and Leon Madsen, of course, they were delighted. But it's not the most sophisticated of places, but it's got plenty of history there. And Ollie Olsen, now his son Jakob Olsen, runs the track and runs the club. He's giving it plenty of energy and plenty of PR. So he's trying to establish it as one of the best Grand Prix on the calendar. And I think his influence is coming through. So, yeah, another terrific Grand Prix.
And you're saying if you're spending a couple of nights there, you're not far from Copenhagen as well, are you? You could head into the big city either before or after and enjoy a bit of Danish life that way too.
You could do, absolutely. And, say Denmark is, it's a bit of an underrated place, if the truth be known. It really is. It's a nice place. And one of the things I like about it is actually driving your car around. You don't get too much traffic like you get here, so moving around is quite easy. So, and that really, you do miss it when you come home. But no, as I say, those two venues, I think if you haven't been to those or you're thinking about it, they're both well worth a visit, and both from a point of view of a speedway, hardcore speedway perspective, they're both really good speedway tracks.
One other quick thing to mention, and this is different because I think this happens around the Bastille holiday, but Mormond long track.
Oh yeah.
That's something different, isn't it? If you're looking for a speedway with a difference over a much longer track, but of course I don't know. It goes on into the night, doesn't it? Long track, it can be a long old affair, and a lot of wine can be drunk in that time. Not by the riders, of course, by the fans.
Well, I have to say, actually, Ian, I've won that meeting 5 times. And I've had a lot of success there. That is a night and a half. I repeat, a night and a half. Because it's Bastille night, they're not going to bed. You don't start before 9 o'clock. Quite often the final doesn't go out before midnight. You can be sat at 3 o'clock in the morning eating your chicken and chips and drinking some pretty rough red wine, thinking it's the best red wine in the world, and basically you don't go to bed. They don't. It's a 550 metre track. It's like a triangle. It's an exciting place. If you want something slightly different and slightly out of left field, Marmande is well worth a visit. You can go to Bordeaux, or there's a couple of different places to go there, but in July, when it is July the 13th or 14th, I think it is, it's really cool. It's a really cool place to go.
Yeah, Speedway, the difference there, but certainly something to have on your radar if you fancy something a bit different. Mormond for the long track on Bastille Day with a lot of wine and a late one. Let's move back to slightly more domestic scenes of. Let's start with Perry-Barr. From Marmande to Perry-Barr in a seamless move.
There's a link.
There's a link. I'm not sure how you do it. There's no smooth way of doing that one, but there it is. British Speedway back on TV on Eurosport. You've had your first fixture at the time of recording this, and that was the meeting between the Birmingham Brummies and the Bellevue Aces. And, Birmingham finally getting that first win on the board. Sprung a little bit of a surprise, I think. But for many, though, the feeling is that that's been coming for a bit. They've been close to getting that first win on the board. They took Sheffield to a superheat. So, a lot of people expecting Birmingham to be the whipping boys. It may turn out to be that they end up down the bottom of the table, but that's not to say that they haven't got a competitive side, because the riders, when they're all firing, are certainly capable of, as we've seen, of getting a result.
Yeah, they had a difficult start. They pushed teams but haven't got over the line, and they also had obviously missing. Pavlicki was missing with injury at the beginning. They've got 3 guys coming in, one of them being Pavlicki, Milik and Lampard, that are going to need a bit of time to settle back into British Speedway, only been riding on the continent in recent seasons. Stevie Worrell, the captain, will need to hold the team together. I think Tom Brennan could be a real star for him this year. It's coming away from Bellevue. I think it's an opportunity for him to really grow in stature. He's in a weaker team, and his performances are going to be... he can't afford... at times when you're in a really good team, you can get away with a performance. Now, all of a sudden, they're in a team where they can't do that. Good to see him win. It was fantastic. Obviously, from a TV perspective, it went to the last heat. There was some good racing and a last heat decider. For Birmingham, obviously, a much needed win. So they were chuffed to bits with that. Subsequently, they got beat last night, but whether they can make the top 4 or not, I actually said, I think in our earlier podcast, I don't think they will. I'd love to be proven wrong by any of the bottom 3 clubs, but I still sense that they are a little vulnerable at times. But Yeah, it was a good night, and wasn't. I looked at that fixture in, and I thought, oh, this potentially could be a bit one-sided, and Bellevue could turn up and just literally steamroller them. But Bellevue aren't doing it away from home at the moment, and fair play to Birmingham. They took advantage of that and got their first win on the board.
The interesting sort of story, I think, that's starting to unfold already is once again who's going to get in the playoffs. I think is going to be the battle from what we're seeing at the moment, because Bellevue, they've got a meeting in hand on the sides around them at the time of recording this. They're currently in 5th place. There are 6 meetings ridden, 8 points. Above them are Oxford, 7 meetings ridden and 9 points. So it's all about winning those games in hand. But we're also seeing as well how important, once again, that aggregate bonus point is going to be, because they are going to add up over the course of the season. But already Sheffield and Ipswich, who of course duelled in the final last year, seem to be the sides that are emerging early doors at this moment in time and starting to pull away from the rest of the pack. But similarly, it's Bellevue, Oxford, Leicester starting to pull away from the likes of Birmingham and Kings Lynn, who are starting to look like they're getting cut adrift already at the bottom. And it's just, you've got the 4 places there, but you've got 5 teams battling for the playoffs. One of them's going to have to miss out.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's the harsh realities of the league. You can't avoid that. That's what it's all about. You know, disappointing starts for Birmingham and Kings Lynn, and as you rightly say, they haven't got a great points tally. The thing that is in their favour, it's still relatively early. Although they have got meetings done earlier than they started earlier in league matches than previous seasons, but there's no doubt that they will have to get on a run of form. It's not like they can't make it mathematically. Of course they can, but right now they've got some ground to make up. Bellevue, I think, are a team that obviously won 2 seasons ago. They won the Premiership 2 seasons ago. Mark Lemon will be a little bit concerned about the way their performances on their travels. Whether they'll look to make changes or not, I don't know. I think they've got a good enough quality in that team. I just need to have Dan Bewley firing on all cylinders and riders not being hit and miss. Like Jamin Lidzi, I think, has been a little bit hit and miss. Brady Kurtz has been fantastic, and without him, things may have looked a little bit more dire. I think Oxford got off to a really strong start. Have slipped down the order a little bit. Maciej Janowski is a big concern for me. He's not getting the points. Even last night, I think he only got, I don't know what he got, 3, 4, something like that.
4, yeah.
So, yeah, so he's really not doing it at number 1. And he will have to. I'm sure in the not too distant future there's going to be a decision there, because he's much better than that, but he hasn't done it so far. I'm not sure how many meetings he's done, but he hasn't had an eye-catching score yet. But yeah, you know, Leicester are a team that I fancied for the top 4, and all of a sudden they're beginning to find their feet, and I expect them to do it. Yeah, you're right. I think it may well be that you get Ipswich and Sheffield fairly comfortable, and then it will be that 4th place that could be battled over.
Yeah, that certainly seems to be how it's looking. But some interesting meetings. We're recording this heading into the bank holiday weekend, and there are going to be a few fixtures on bank holiday Monday, including a daytime meeting at Bellevue, daytime meeting at Ipswich, actually, Ipswich and Kings Lynn, the Old Farm Derby, as they call it there in the East, I believe. They're going to be racing each other there at Vauxhall, so that's going to be one to watch. And then Leicester are at Oxford, which, as far as the talk about those playoffs places, there, of course, they're facing each other, so that's they're both on 9 points as well. So that deadlock is going to be broken.
Yeah, that could be quite an affair. And I must say, I went up to Oxford just recently to do some filming for the opening show, and it's a smashing venue, and I liked it there, and it reminded me how good it was there. Oxford are ambitious. They're running 3 teams. They are, a proactive club, giving it everything they got. But Leicester, I sense that are beginning to find some form now. That could be quite a tussle there, and it will be a good one for the home team to win. But all of a sudden, you're looking at it, and we're talking about playoffs and who's going to make the playoffs straight away. I mean, and I think that it just shows you that the competitive nature of this league. you get off to a poor start and you're on the back foot right from the get-go. It was remarkable how things worked out last year with Ipswich managing to get the better of Leicester. I mean, that was heartbreaking for Leicester, and I'm sure they won't want that to happen again. But yeah, Bank Holiday money looks really exciting. The Kings Lynn Ipswich, I would say Ipswich will be favourites there, but Kings Lynn losing Muszalak last night, that's a big blow. That's a big blow, and Rob Lyon must be thinking, what have I got to do? Because he's put together quite an attractive team there. The one rider I would like to see back, I would like to see Robert Lambert back in there, really. You know, I'd like to see him. He's synonymous with Kings Lynn. I'm surprised he hasn't returned full-time to British Speedway, but he has his reasons for that. But, yeah, it'll be an exciting time. And as I say, right from this early stage of the season, these meetings are proving to be really very important indeed. You can't cruise here. You've got to be on your game all the time.
Yeah, I think it's to do with Swedish commitments, I think, for Robert Lambert, and he's locked in a contract with his Swedish club at the moment, and it means that he can't really race for Kings Lynn or something like that. That seems to be the situation for him at the moment, because he was asked about it, and so it was commitments that he's already wrapped up in. But I think that's not to say never, and I don't know, there's only so many clubs you can imagine Robert Lambert riding for, really. You know, Kings Lynn being the obvious one. That's where he grew up, and of course won the title with Bellevue, but then also came in as a bit of a guest for Sheffield as well and did all right around there. So I think there'll be plenty of interest, but I think Kings Lynn, obviously, I think his relationship with Buster would be, you know, the obvious choice, wouldn't it, if he did ever come back?
Yeah, I can see him coming back at some point. I wasn't aware that he had some sort of agreement in Sweden. Maybe there's an agreement where, or maybe Robert just doesn't want to ride in 3 leagues and the World Championship. That makes you very busy indeed. It's either or for him, I would suggest. But at some point, I sense that, you know, he will come back and ride full time in the UK. Sweden isn't quite as strong as it once was, and I think that's one of the reasons that riders are beginning to choose Britain rather than Sweden. But yeah, I think Britain's shaping up nicely. You know, we've had one meeting on Eurosport, which was a good one. We've got our next one is going to be Sheffield Ipswich, which is a repeat, of course, of last year's grand final, second leg. Ipswich will want to try and get some sort of revenge there. So that's one to look forward to. That's on the Monday after the next round of the World Championship in Poland. So, yeah, I'm excited about it. And I think I'm more excited about it, genuinely more excited about it, because we've got a lot of really eye-catching riders back in British Speedway. And I didn't see that coming in. You know, 2 or 3 seasons ago, after COVID, I'm just thinking, crikey, no Speedway in 2020, you know, a shortened calendar in 2021. And suddenly, you know, 23, 24, we've got some of the best riders in the world back here. And that's encouraging.
Yeah, it is. And hopefully more will follow over the time as well. I mean, we have unfortunately lost Vadim Tarasenko. He's quit British Speedway to head back to, riding in Poland. He's got commitments there, of course, and I don't think things working out for him here. And Nikolai Klintz has been fortunate there because he was with Oxford, got released. Eric Riss came into there, and now Nikolai's gone back to Kings Lynn. At least he's already got the Kevlars from last year, so he fits in straight away. So there is that bonus. But that's just how Speedway goes, isn't it? It does become a bit of a merry-go-round at times. But good to have these. You know, again, Nikolai has been a good servant to British Speedway over the years, and good for him to be able to get back on a bike at the top level pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's a good point. I was a bit disappointed to hear that Vadim Tarasenko has actually left British Speedway. When he turned up last year for the Peterborough Panthers, he seemed to settle very well. He was a real star, seemed to be very keen to be here, and he actually expressed the fact that he'd been trying to come to race in England for some time. So I sense that maybe his Polish club have put pressure on him to actually come out of British Speedway, and that's really sad, because for Tarasenko, I think he could have been a real fan favourite at Kings Lynn. Who knows? I wouldn't rule it out that we see him again, but right now I was a bit disappointed when I saw that. But of course, with the sudden change of direction from Oxford and Nikolai Klint being released, it was handy for him to be back there and really hardly break stride, in truth. So that was handy for him. And Eric Riss looks like he's healthy. He had this eye condition last year, and it was really, I think it was a knock on from COVID. Excuse me, and he really struggled last year. But from what I'm hearing, it sounds like he's fully back to health. But as I say, it's exciting. I'd like to see Maciej Janowski. I really hope he can turn his form around, because I was lucky enough to see him riding and winning leagues back in the mid-teens in 2015. I think that was the last time he was around. And he rode really well in the UK. He looked the business, and he was fantastic for pool, particularly. So if Maciej can just rediscover that sort of enjoyment, and maybe take some advice from his teammate in Wrocław, Ty, because Ty definitely has come back to the UK because he enjoys it. You know, he gets paid well. I'm sure he gets paid well by Sheffield, but fundamentally, I think he's got a smile on his face when he's racing, and I think Maciej Janowski needs that. I think he looks like he's a man that sort of is fallen out of love with the game at the moment. He needs to somehow rediscover that.
Yeah, it would be good to see him back on full form, and of course for him as well to get back to that, because of course he's aiming to qualify back into the Grand Prix series again as well, potentially. So that form needs to carry on from the league to those performances too. Just a quick word for actually Tom Brennan narrowly missed out getting into the final qualifier for the SEC series, the European Championships. I think he just missed out in a runoff for him, so bitterly disappointing for him, but certainly getting very close to that. Eric Riss, though, as you mentioned, he has qualified for the final race-off for the Speedway European Championships, so that was a good day for him. I think racing in Austria, which is not a country synonymous particularly with much in the way of Speedway qualifiers, but they were on the map, and that did look like a bit of a British track, certainly out in the woods there, but it sort of looked like a decent size, so he lapped that up, and Eric Riss having a much better year this year overall. Yeah,
well, I think he's just, as I say, I think he's healthy. And I know I spoke to him 2 or 3 times, and he was just, the problem he had is that they couldn't actually, the doctors couldn't actually tell him really what was wrong with him, and they were having to sort of almost guess and try different medications to see if they can sort it out. Obviously they've got to the bottom of it. Good news for Eric. I feel for Tom Brennan. I wasn't aware of that result. I knew he was racing in Austria. I think there were 2, weren't there? I think there were 2 qualifiers.
Yeah.
There was one in Hungary as well.
Debrecen, yeah.
And he'll be frustrated about that. But who knows, if he gets a bit of good fortune, he will be reserved for the next round. If he's only just missed out on a runoff, if there's an injury or illness, then maybe he will then go to effectively the challenge for the SEC. And the SEC, you actually get in it this year, don't you? So you don't have to wait till next year. You can actually join the series this season. So hence they're coming thick and fast, those qualifiers. But as I say, Tom Brennan, I think he's on the verge of making a bit of a breakthrough. You know, he rode well. I mean, he rode pretty well on Monday when I saw him. I thought he looked really good.
Yeah, no, he's having a good season. He's fired up, and he had a good winter as well. He rode rode in that USA versus the world thing in California again, and certainly got some laps in. You know, very early, started his season a bit earlier than everybody else, and it certainly seems to be fired up this year with a change of venue as well, in moving to Birmingham, moving to the Pool Pirates as well in the championship, because he won the league last year with Glasgow at Pool, and now he's a Pool Pirates rider. Steve Worrell going in the other direction in that league as well, back up to Glasgow. So he's certainly got himself in the limelight, and with a good chance of winning stuff you'd fancy with Pool, certainly, and then obviously at Birmingham, it's sort of a closer setup for him as well from his home base.
Yeah, and exactly, and I think looking forward, I'm sure we'll talk about this in the future, but of course the Speedway of Nations is going to be held in Manchester, in Bellevue, and you know, Tom Brennan will very much want to be part of that, if he can be. You know, he knows that track well, he's rode for Bellevue, he's actually won a gold medal there as a consequence of Ty Wolfenden being injured, and Robert Lambert and Dan Bewley coming through in flying colours just a few short years ago. So, you know, there's plenty to race. He is at the cusp on his career. It's an exciting time for him. So, long may that continue. And it's good to see, from a British point of view, another rider beginning to really make his mark. I'd like to see Adam Ellis also begin to really find his feet back in Britain and riding for Ipswich after the former British champion just had a really disappointing time for Sheffield last year. So, as I say, we've got some quality kicking about.
Absolutely, yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how those riders go and the opportunities they grab. So you'll be back on the TV then, as you mentioned, heading to Warsaw for the next round of the Grand Prix of Poland, and then Sheffield, bright lights of Sheffield for Sheffield versus Ipswich, top of the table clash. That should be it's going to be a big one.
Yeah. Absolutely, and they moan at me for saying it's Owlerton because they say Allerton, but I say it's actually spelled O-W-L, and in my part of the world it's Owl, so I stick with that, very much to the South Yorkshire crowd's annoyance. But no, Allerton is, is fantastic. I'll say it again, Allerton, but they are the champions, and they've got a championship-looking team. They've got a terrific eye-catching team with the two Holder boys and Ty in there. Josh Pickering also. I mean, that's a good lineup. And Damien Bates certainly went about building his team very quickly. He signed it up in double quick order, and they look like they're very ambitious to retain their championship. Ipswich off to a much better start. Star-studded lineup once again in there. They've lost Danny King, and Danny King obviously potentially won't be fit, but I think Scott Nichols rode for him the other night and did quite well, and they're going to be reliant on using a guest. But if they get Emil Saifutinov going and get him back in double figures on a regular basis, then I think that could be quite a tear up there on Monday, the 13th of May. And as I say, I think that that track is fast. It's a big D shape. It's full gas. It's exciting around there. If the weather's good, it'll be a really good league match.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to that one. And Sheffield versus Ipswich, a week on Monday at the time of releasing this, which will be you've got the date there, the 13th, is that right?
13th, yeah.
And then what's your plans after that? Have you got the other fixtures there?
Yeah, I have. I for British Speedway we're talking about.
Yeah.
Because obviously it's back-to-back Grand Prix. We go from obviously that, I go on to Germany. And then it's on to Leicester on the 27th of the month against Oxford, which will be, I presume, the return leg of the bank holiday meeting on Monday. So that could have quite a lot riding on it, particularly if it's a close score on at Sandy Lane on Monday. So those are the two more to come in May from British Eurosport. We've got British Final coming up in June, of course. That's quite early. But the two to focus on is Sheffield and Leicester, just a couple of weeks apart.
Okie dokie. Look out for those. And that first leg, Oxford versus Leicester, is also going to be on BSN on Monday night as well. So you can watch both parts of that one. Should be a thriller, exciting racing. And Chris Harris, of course. I did Oxford versus Glasgow in the Championship Knockout Cup the other day, and that was the unique quirk of Chris Harris being in the away pits for the side that he, of course, is captaining in the Premiership. He's visitor for for the Championship, but it led to the great situation of the two Oxford captains in Scott Nichols and Chris Harris having an epic battle in Heat 11. It was an amazing race with the two of them throwing the bikes at each other, but in a fair fashion as well. But Scotty got there at the end though.
Yeah, I've heard about this because a mate of mine was actually mechanicking for Chris Harris that night, and so he's given me the whole lowdown there. I've got all the nitty gritty on that one, and I'll tell you that. And but it can only happen in Speedway, couldn't it? I mean, it's quite hard if you're outside the sport to get your head around that one. And even for me, that I'm inside the sport, and I'm just thinking that is rather bizarre. I do know that it was a classic of a heat. And it was sort of, they turned the clock back when they were battling for British Championships at Monmore Green. And there was always a sense of rivalry between those two. They do like beating each other, that's for sure. But it was a good win for the Oxford Cheetahs on Wednesday, I believe. But no, Chris Harris, as always, is a fan favourite. So good stuff.
Have you seen Cruz Harris yet? I think you had him on Eurosport as well, didn't you, on Monday? Little Cruz on his little bike, 4-year-old.
Yeah.
Next generation is coming.
Yeah. Yeah, his mum was there, and they were just doing a little bit of filming and rushing around the track on their electric Ossets, I think they call them, just before the meeting started. So Chris is quite keen for him to be up on two wheels, and yeah, you know, as long as he's enjoying it, I'm sure he loves it.
Yeah. It's all good. Everybody loves seeing Cruz going round doing his laps beforehand, and he's got his little Glasgow race suit as well now. They've given him the full gear. It's really cute.
Yeah, it looks the business.
I know. Got more gear than most riders. Okay, well, look, thanks a lot, Kelv. Good to catch up, and we'll catch up again after your probably after your trip to Germany for the Bratwurst debrief.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I you know, hopefully it won't upset my stomach too much, because those spicy sausages, they can cause all sorts of trouble. But no, I'd like that, because we've got plenty to look forward to, of course, in June with three World Championship rounds and more, and the British final as well. So there's lots to look forward to in June, possibly one of the busiest months of the season. But no problem. Yeah, it's been fun. Look forward to getting together again.
Okay, cheers, Kel. Thanks a lot, and safe journeys wherever you may travel.
Thank you.